The older generation has got a cliche habit. They always say that the younger generation are spoiled because life in the older days was so much more difficult. So, especially when it comes to studying, the older generation is always unforgiving of the younger generation when they say that they can't study. Apparently, they have been given everything on a silver plate, and still they can't do the basic thing, that is to study. Isn't that outrageous? Yes, it is. But when you look from the vantage point of the younger generation, things look very different. As a counselor for an age group which is mature enough to express their inner feelings and thoughts, but young enough not to try to hide them, I had a glimpse into that world of the younger generation. Then, when you look at from their point of view, you realize that it's not all roses. There are just so many thorns. In this short chapter, we will explore how the younger generation is actually suffering from what I'll be referring to the diagram that you see. In this way, you'll be able to have a big picture of my findings. So let me explain to you how to read the diagram first. On the left hand side, you have this column which consists of the various parameters against which I will be comparing the 7 generations, which is listed in the bottom row. Then you will see some lines that are either slanting upwards or downwards, and some are just horizontal. These indicate how the parameters have changed across the 7 generations. Before I move on to the actual analysis across the various generations, let me just explain to you the 7 generations. You can do a Google search on them for more information on each of them. But here I will give you a very short mention of each of them with a quick explanation. Do you have any children who are currently below 14 years old? They could be also nieces, nephews, brothers, sisters. Well, these people or children are referred to as Generation Alpha. Why that particular name? Well, that's not important, and it could have been another name, and I'm sure that the next generation will still have more interesting names. Then if you have teenagers now who are 15 and above, up to the age of 28 or so, then they are called the Generation Z. These students are currently at the writing of this book in 2025 in high school or grade 11, 12, and doing their bachelor's degree or having completed it. Some of them have even started their jobs. Then if you have some office colleagues or business partners who are between the age of 28 and 40, they fall under the millennium generation. We can say that these people are at the peak of their careers. Then if you have some clients or employers or landlords who are between 41 and 55, then they fall in the Generation X. These people would have peaked in their careers and would be settling in one way or the other. Then we have those retired folks or the investors who are above 55 up till 70. They are called the baby boomer generations. This is preceded by the silent generation, who are maybe sick at home or walking in the park and playing with their grandchildren. They'll be between 71 and 85. The president of USA, Mr. Donald Trump, would fall in this generation, and they are still active, some of them at least. And then from 86 to 100, we have the greatest generation. Those who are alive are almost centurions, and if they're still around, they must have seen many of their relatives and friends gone to heavens. This breakdown of generations is very convenient to make sense of the trend and mentality of people at various times in history. Of course, in each generations there will be vast differences across races, localities, gender, not to mention interests, capacities, aspirations. Still, why we can cluster them into one single group is that they would have faced, all of them, similar global events of that particular time. Some of them would react in a certain way while others in another way. However, it's very hard to disagree that there is not a general characteristics that applies to people who have experienced similar political, social, economic, medical, environmental ups and downs in the same period of time. In this book, my main focus will be on Generation Z and to some extent Generation Alpha. Across the various parameters, I will be touching on the other generation only to make a point in Generation Z and Alpha. It's very difficult to make proper analysis of anything without comparing it to the surroundings and other elements. So I want you to rise above this easy explanation that the younger generation is lazy or dishonest and is too privileged as opposed to the older generation. Let's analyze how much truth there is in our quick judgment. By the end of this chapter, I'm sure that your understanding of the younger generation, which is Z and Alpha, will change. Again, I am focusing on the studies and learning aspect more than work and relationships here. Before I embark into the generation-wise analysis across the various 12 parameters, let me just briefly explain to you each of the parameters so that you will be familiar when I talk about them separately. The first parameter are the basic needs, namely there are three: food, shelter, and clothing. But the definition of basic has broadened up now to having a mode of transport, be it a bicycle, a motorcycle, or a car. Now, even a mobile phone is a basic need. In many countries, a washing machine is a basic need. So, the definition of basic needs keep getting higher in terms of standards of living over time. This is exactly what we will investigate in our cross-generational analysis of this parameter. The next parameter we'll be talking about is dysfunctional families. Leo Tolstoy said it best: there are thousands of ways to be unhappy, but only few ways to be happy. I am paraphrasing him to bring my point across that unlike in idealistic movies, it seems that dysfunctional families have been around since forever, or at least the beginning of civilization. It means a family where the parents fight and the children are misguided. It's just a family which is not able to give happiness to one and another, and there could be innumerable reasons for that. So over the generation, how has the dysfunctionality in families changed? We'll discuss about that. The third parameter we'll be covering is social connection. Humans are social animals. The worst punishment you can give is to confine somebody into solitary confinement. We may not want to be disrupted by strangers as we walk on the road, but we certainly cannot live in a deserted island. So, this need of social contact and the way our perception towards it has changed across the generations will be discussed about. The other three parameters are related to the technology of mass communication. Each of the three have affected us in different ways. Again, each of them is affecting us currently in different ways, depending on which generation we belong to. Of course, technology is man made, but it has a serious consequence in our psyche. The first of them is the television and cinema. Nowadays, it seems so distant when we talk about these two innovations, but they really impressed a lot in the earlier generations. The next one is the mobile phones and the ubiquitous broadband. That's nearer to us, and it feels important. How has it shaped us across the various generations that are still alive now is going to be discussed later on. The next technology is the artificial intelligence, followed by the plug and play concept and the click economy. Of course, they are parts of the mobile phones, but they have to be treated separately because they have a significant effect in the various generations' psyche, choices, concepts of life, and values. We cannot understand our upcoming generation Z and Alpha without understanding thoroughly those three um, technologies. Virtual reality might be the next technological advancement which will affect the future generations, but it's still a far away concept for now, so I will ignore it here. The seventh parameter we'll be discussing here is the corona lockdown, which has touched the lives of all the 7 billion people on Earth. The scale of the pandemic that COVID-19 was is gigantic, not only in the number of people that died, but in the way society has been affected. However, since this book is about studies and learning, I want to talk mainly about the effect of Corona on these two elements of education. The biggest hit was taken by Generation Z and to some extent Generation Alpha, but I will make my case in the relevant section later on. Another set I will be talking is about how we behave and spend our time. The first one is habits and balanced lifestyle. How has this perception changed across time and generations? Is the habit of smoking increasing or decreasing? What about drinking? What's happening to the concept of work-life balance? So this is what we'll be discussing in this set. As students, what's happening to making foundations in their studies? Are the educationalists designing the syllabus so that there's a strong foundation, or are they just making the buildings higher and higher but with weaker foundations. In my own findings, how do I perceive the weakening of the educational foundation across the various generations is what I'll be talking about here. The last one in this set is the confusion between what is more important, marks or the actual learning. Have parents changed across the various generations in terms of what they expect from the students and the schools and colleges? Are they looking for high grades, or that the student or the children loves their studies and is learning effectively? We'll explore if there was change in this confusion or not over time and generations. Finally, we'll be touching the parameter of difficult childhood. Which generation has a tougher childhood and why? For some, difficult might mean not having food on the table, and for others, it might mean not being able to buy a pretty dress for the party at school. But we cannot lessen the perception of difficult for the later child just because it's not as heavy as the former child. The perception of difficulty to me is like a fire sensor. Even if there is a big fire or a small fire, the sensor will go off and the siren will start blaring. So we want to see how this perception of difficulty is changing across the various generations. The last parameter is an aspirational one. We want to analyze how the hope of a better life ahead as an adult has increased across the various generations. Do the children today feel that they have chances of a better life now, or do they feel that their life is doomed? How about the earlier generations? What did they think when they were young themselves about the future? We'll be discussing that in the relevant section. So now you have understood all the 7 generation and 12 parameters. Again, I want to remind you the objective of this chapter is to understand the new kinds of problems that Generation Z and Alpha are facing. My main objective here is to help those children today to study better, to learn more effectively. In order to do that, we cannot ignore the environment and the world that they live in and the part of history that they belong to. That is the reason I wrote this particular chapter.